Hello, my name is Mateusz Felczak and I work at the Institute of Humanities at SWPS University in Warsaw. My talk would be focused on one of the methods of analyzing local esports markets, which involves the implementation of the Circuit of Culture framework developed within the British Cultural Studies. As you can see, I would focus on Eastern Europe and Poland specifically, and this analysis would involve modern-day developments of these markets. Basically, my research question is what influenced the local esports scene and what factors continue to shape it. So, the plan for today's talk is quite simple and reads as follows. First, I will provide a very cursory historical background and make a few takeaways concerning the local markets. Then I would move into the applying Circuit of Culture network framework to the analysis of local esports. And the Circuit of framework consists of several stages, several elements, such as representation, identity, production, consumption, and regulation. It is important to note that for the sake of the study, I looked at the high-profile events, mostly large-scale ones, such as Intel Extreme Masters, hosted in February in Katowice. The reason for this was that they are not only the most profitable and most popular, but also I was able to contact directly their media representatives and get a bit of an insight how they function and operate as media outlets. Of course, the global pandemic made it a little bit more difficult than I've initially planned, but nevertheless, large-scale events enable to gather much more secondary and tertiary sources for someone who wishes to investigate them from an academic standpoint. In order to contextualize the modern-day changes within the Polish and Eastern European esports scene, I need to make a very brief historical detour. This part is not meant to provide any sort of comprehensive history of esports, but I think it is important to look at some of the focal points which changed its trajectory and heavily influenced the ways in which esports events function in the context of modern day and digital media. Oftentimes, the beginnings of esports are tracked back to the Space War game tournament, as you can see on this screenshot, which happened in October 1972 at the Stanford University. What I would like to point out here is that we know of this event largely because of the presence of one of the Rolling Stone magazine journalists, who not only covered it in the written form in the article, but also was a representative of the unofficial sponsor of the tournament, providing, at that time, rather symbolic prizes for the tournament's winners. So, the takeaway here is that even at that time, it was apparent that the esports event requires an audience and media presence. If it is neither covered in any medium nor broadcasted or commented in any way, then it hardly fits the requirements of the esports label. Sorry. So the next important historical context needed to be assessed is the emergence of tournaments, which were televised and gained substantial coverage in the mainstream media. So here's a screenshot from the famous American Nintendo World Championships, and here I'd like to focus just on one important element: the fact that the competitors were divided into distinct age groups. So in Eastern Europe, the esports market relies on a specific demographic, or rather, the economic viability of esports is dependent on quite distinct group of consumers, which are, perhaps unsurprising, adolescent males, but also adolescent females. What is more, labeling video games as something trivial and suited only for children has been dismissed in the general public quite fast. As to why it's happened so smoothly over the years, I'll comment on it later. This issue is also connected with the paradigm of perceiving esports as something that one has to grow up to. higher or more serious type of activity than just leisure gaming. Here's a screenshot from a StarCraft commercial, which kind of capitalizes on this notion and was also broadcasted in Poland. It features dad who is showing his growing son a StarCraft game, presenting it as something that one has to, well, basically be mature enough to appreciate. Of course, we have large-scale tournaments and large-scale events now, and with the advent of events such as World Cyber Games, also the local scene grew up substantially and is now focused on very few titles, a very few games, which this scene basically shares with the other parts of the world where esports are popular. Nevertheless, there's this kind of local specificity, local specific angle when one wants to analyze the local esports scene. For example, in this screenshot from one of the broadcasts of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 tournaments, which was officially presented as Polish national champions, a championship of concerning this game. We can see that even games which are not considered to have worldwide esports potential, such as third edition of Heroes of Might and Magic, are nevertheless quite popular in the local scene. At the bottom of the screen, you can see several sponsors mentioned. So it is like a relatively well established yearly, I would say, tournament, which features the key players from Polish scene, and it kind of drives home the point that the local market has its own angle. So it's not only the most popular worldwide titles such as Dota or Counter-Strike or League of Legends, but also some titles which may not be normally considered an esports worthy title, but nevertheless they somehow thrive in the local market. So before I move into the Secret of Culture framework, a few words about the definition of esports that I would use and why it is important to stress some elements of it that pertain the analysis of local markets. So first, probably one of the most popular definition of esports by Juho Hamari and Max Schüblum, which states that, well, esports are basically facilitated by electronic systems, and what is important here is that the input of players and the output of players, which are mediated by human-computer interfaces. So there's this threshold, this element of computing in between, which kind of mediates. And also in terms of esports spectatorship, it is also important to note that it is kind of filter which decides what the audience sees, basically, when it comes to esports broadcasts. Then there's this second definition by Nick Taylor, which stresses the fact that esports are spectator-driven sports, and it involves a whole range of activities, and that esports is this kind of, well, basically hierarchical structure. That you have promotional activities, you need to have some broadcasting infrastructure, and also the socioeconomic organization of teams is also important. Then you have tournaments, leagues, and last but not least, what is also important, you have players and their embodied performance. So how they behave on the scene, how do they look on a camera, is also important in esports. I will come back to this element later in the analysis of Intel Extreme Masters broadcasts. Okay, now the Circuit of Culture framework. So it has been developed within the British Cultural Studies, as I've said, which was a very influential European school of thought, probably most famous for initiating or instigating the serious academic reflection of popular culture. So up to the 60s and 70s, most models of critique were somehow dismissive towards the consumers of popular culture, treating them more as mindless followers of commercial trends rather than self-reflective entities. British cultural studies scholars in the likes of John Fisk, Richard Hoggett, or Paul Guy, the co-author of the Circuit of Culture model, proposed to think of the mass audiences as conscious consumers, basically, who are capable of selecting, interpreting, and altering the meanings of popular movies, books, and video games, for that matter, too. The Circuit of Culture model, developed and further enhanced in the second half of 1990s, can be treated as a kind of a framework used to interpret how a particular cultural product is prepared, produced, promoted, and then interpreted and circulated by its audiences. I have applied this theory to the study of local esports markets by moving through the branches of this circuit, these particular elements, and asking questions associated with each of the branches. So before me, Hong Kong-based scholar Oli Leino also used the British Cultural Studies framework to study esports, but he was more interested in the arcade game scene, whereas I focused more on business side of things. One of my inspirations was Afra Kerr, who in her book on the video game business stated that the media production and consumption is in itself always a circular process. So in order to understand why current esports media landscape looks one way or another, one needs to connect the multifold elements which constitute the media circuit. Okay, the first element, representation. So basically, it encompasses a system through which meaning is communicated to the audience. So it can be everything, basically, from the way hosts and commentators are dressed to the content of the short video materials introducing the players. What is also important when talking about the Circuit of Culture framework is that the representation and identity are the two most visible elements of it. So this is something that the audience basically has a direct contact to. And when we speak about representation, it is like this twofold structure. We have form and we have context. So we have the way things are presented and we have the context in which they appear during broadcasts. And as it is the case in global esports, also in Poland, the kind of line of evolution went from this grassroots hobbyist-like initiatives to the more serious business of esports. And representation is this element that shows it basically the most. So how these production values really changed over time. What is also crucial to note that modern day large-scale esports events are often, or they involved something which is called white label products. So the substantial part of the work is basically outsourced to third parties, which are basically they just get rid of their logos, of their brand identity in order to work under this umbrella label, this umbrella company that sponsors the whole event and would like to promote itself through it. So, for example, Blizzard's BlizzCon during the BlizzCons, there are hired camera crews. There are different people who are responsible for video editing, for live coverage, which may have their own affiliation with very different business entities. But this idea of white label is that once they are hired, they basically just work on under this big umbrella term of BlizzCon. So the same happens with Intel Extreme Masters, who, for example, hires foreign camera crews to come to, in terms of the Katowice tournaments, they hire them so they can come to Poland and basically film the whole event. Okay, one example here to drive home this representational element. So here is one of the most successful Polish esports teams who back in the day who made their breakthrough, as you can see, in 2014. So they started under a very peculiar name. You can see it at the bottom of the screen. Kiedyś miałem team in Polish. It can be literally translated as I used to have a team, which was a playful and comical comment on their situation at that time. So basically, they were not sponsored in any organized way, despite being involved in business negotiations on various levels. The negotiations failed, and they decided to name themselves in such a way. However, after the unprecedented success, almost all the members were contracted by Rocket, and immediately their media presence strategy changed. They got labeled outfits, they signed various agreements, and basically became just another League of Legends team from the looks of it. And their story, this rapid development, is a testament to the evolution of the scene and also the ongoing struggles to find a suitable business partnership, which many of these early esports athletes faced and frankly are still facing up to this day. Like esports is not like a very stable business environment, at least in terms of Eastern Europe. Okay, but also the important element of representation is how the events are presented and broadcasted. Here you have a screenshot from Intel Extreme Masters Katowice, and you can see the aforementioned camera crews working. And even though this event has already been hit by the pandemic crisis and there was no live audience involved in it, nevertheless the production values basically stayed at the same level. So everything was broadcasted as planned. Also, one of the important elements when it comes to large-scale esports events, also the local ones, is how to present the players during the event. So how to make them basically fit the media format, how to make them presentable. So one of the newest inventions, quite curious one, is the use of holograms. So yeah, for example, here you have a screen caption from the live broadcasts showing one of the StarCraft players as a hologram during the pre-match analysis desk. Also, the other crucial element of representation is what is shown during specific time of broadcast. So there are, of course, some decisions to be made by the producers, like on the go. So they have to decide: do they show the audience, for example, weaving their handmade banners, or do they concentrate on the facial expressions of players? So the global trend is that this specific traits of digital culture permeate the physical space of the on-site event. So they are basically these two dimensions that we can speak of, the physical and the digital. And yeah, here's a screenshot from WCS circuit in 2019. So Polish scene is specific in a way that we see much more elements which directly relate to the national symbols, such as flags, banners, etc. This is connected with another element of the circuit of culture, which is identity. So the basic notion of identity is well tied to the community aspect of esports. And also it comes down to the question whether a particular product, in this case esports event, evokes any kind of values. So does it make otherwise diverse groups of people come together and experience something as one? Identity can be, of course, fostered in many ways, and there are companies and products which try to capitalize on it and invent values that could be subsequently attached to any given product and in effect produce a desired impact among the consumers. However, because the local esports scene is already quite deeply intertwined with the traditional sports and their ways of expressing collective feelings towards players as representatives of a particular geographic and cultural community, we can observe well more kind of grassroots-like incentives which are aimed at facilitating the sense of identity in connection with esports. Of course, in practical terms, identity is connected with the production of meaning. So fostering a sense of identity also takes over the control of how the audiences basically interprets many of the elements of the esports broadcasts. Of course, this idea of teamwork is, well, I would say not very well established in the Eastern Europe market. There's this, of course, tradition of collective effort, but it is understood not from the team perspective, but more from the perspective of community of players which belong to a particular nation. For example, Polish players or yeah, especially Polish players. And so we have this particular elements of expressing the Polish national identity, which happened during large-scale broadcasts. They stem from these grassroots initiatives. Yeah, as you can see, this Polish flag stating "Good luck, have fun," but also there's this address of one of the Polish StarCraft clans. These are pictures from the first Intel Extreme Masters finals, which happened back in 2013-14. You can also see that Polish players kind of the Polish audience also like to express their attachment to particular symbols. And yeah, there's also this banner stating that Polish Intel Extreme Masters is the best Intel Extreme Masters. So this is kind of pushing, this is kind of a message to the business incentives that the esports is welcome in Poland on the also level of this large-scale events. So it was kind of a means to express identity, but also means to show that it is worth to organize large-scale events in Poland. These kind of elements of like belonging to national identity symbols group are also visible during streams or like more private broadcasts. So here is Indie StarCraft, one of the most popular StarCraft hosts and like this community figures. He commentates and many tournaments. He provides coverage in Polish language for people who are interested in it. And as you can see, yeah, we have this elements such as football scarves and national flags displayed in the overlay of his stream. And it's not a coincidence. It's like this part of this identity package, so to speak. And curiously enough, these flags are present also when there are virtually no Polish players involved in a particular tournament or at a particular stage of the tournament. It's more of a way of expressing this identity which comes from the viewers. But of course, it is also aimed to support players as well. And also, we can see this kind of rhetoric of this national pride in many media initiatives, like this screenshot of a Facebook post by Esportmania. Esportmania is one of the many initiatives sponsored by Onet Media Group, and they are this kind of business strategy is more and more prevalent when it comes to Eastern Europe markets. So we have like one business entity which tries to enter different platforms. So they've launched, for example, Esportmania as program broadcast that's on Twitch TV and on YouTube, but they also have websites. They have like this news outlet, and they of course have their Facebook fan page. So here we have this telling caption which says that this team has to revenge the compatriots. So this is kind of like a rhetoric that an esports match is something more than just a game. Of course, we have this connection of esports scene. Here are Polish FIFA players with the current president of the Poland, Mr. Andrzej Duda. So we have like a national esports teams also, and there was this one curious case that Mr. Duda also launched a TikTok channel just to invite young players to enter state-sponsored esports tournament. It was during the height of the pandemic here in Poland. So the idea was to encourage young people to stay at home, but also to give them something that they can that they can do, which would of course kind of foster this this notion of identity too. Also, there's this overlap of traditional sports business and esports business, and it in terms of Polish scene now it pertains mostly the overlap between football and esports titles which are popular in Poland, such as Counter-Strike. So here's a screenshot of one of the incentives in which Polish professional football players played Counter-Strike match in order to raise money. And well, as you can probably see, it was the incentive was to kind of help to stop the spread of COVID-19. So yeah, there's this kind of overlap on many different levels, I would say. Okay, the next element, production. So the production basically consists of two elements. First, we have production of meanings, and then we have digital production. So here, basically the main set of questions pertains the issues of managing the digital environment of esports. So in that way, it is different from representation, as representation element can be perceived as this final product, a final outcome of the broadcast, something which audience sees. So when I look into production, I try to also look, well, behind the scenes to see what non-obvious factors contribute to the final form of a large-scale esports event. So one of the important elements, of these developments of this production aspect of esports in the local market is the downfall of gaming houses. So this, prolific idea of game houses is no more. We had prominent historical examples like this Evil Geniuses house launched in the USA. The initial idea was to incentivize this kind of collective effort and, cultivate the culture of responsibility for other team members. So, yeah, the prominent examples involved, EG House, among the others. However, in American and European context, this idea proved not to be very suitable. So the houses were, first difficult to maintain, and the financial burden of supporting such incentive proved to not be very fruitful in the long term. Sometimes these incentives had more in common with reality shows than with the idea of this ideal training environment. So yeah, like this traditional Asian model of gaming house, it's does not function in the context of Eastern Europe as much. However, this experiment yielded the emergence of new positions, and so this professionalization of esports went in terms of course, local markets, Eastern Europe, went through this stage of gaming houses, which kind of failed, but then it resulted in this new jobs which work behind the scenes in terms of production values. But these production values which are not like directly visible to the audience during the broadcast. So these are performance coaches, nutritionists, sports psychologists. So where previously were only team managers and maybe team captains, now we have a wide range of specialists who provide really diverse expertise in order to help the particular team achieve the desired results. Also, esports starts to be promoted through dedicated events, which are conducted under this educational label. So this is aimed to attract investors and show the healthy and thriving business environment. This is one of the you can see this is one of the companies that I spoke before, the Onet Group, one of the more like serious media outlets that invested in Polish esports recently. So these kind of events are more focused on like the transfers, acquisitions of players, mergers, some joint incentives, and predominantly to advertise and foster new multi-platform venues through which the idea of esports as a form of digital entertainment is promoted. So what is also interesting is that starting from this academic year, there is an opportunity to study esports business management in Poland at the academic level. So one of the private schools has such an offer. And here you can see, this is under this education umbrella. And of course, there's some overlap with traditional TV owners who are also more and more interested in esports. And historically in Poland, we had some experiments with various gaming TV channels, but now it's kind of switched to these streaming media platforms. So sometimes in the media we can see the directly expressed desires about shaping the esports fandom according to the patterns that we can see among the fans of non-digital sports. So here we can see one of the most popular Polish streamers who is at the same time a successful Counter-Strike player and important esports personality, Piotr Skowyrski, who in one of the interviews mentioned that he would wish to see esports fans committed to their favorite players and teams on the equal level of involvement as it is the case among the football hooligans. So this is what basically the caption says here. There are also this kind of interesting elements of production and promotion here involved. Okay, the next key element, moving into the next key element, the consumption. So this, of course, on the surface level, boils down to designing the communication channels between various entities, between fans and players, between the fans and large-scale events. So this element kind of shapes how the given product or show is consumed. So how people watch it and how they use it, what they do with the broadcast, so to speak. So there's this increasingly important notion in esports, especially in local esports, that tries to involve celebrity culture and influencer culture to kind of promote esports to the audiences that may not be the core diehard players who are interested in competitive play anyway. So this is also one of the goals with Esportmania that I've mentioned before. So and incentive financed by the Onet Media Group. They also try to use various popular internet personalities to promote esports related content to very various audiences. In the consumption element, there is also important this notion of creating an illusion of the audience empowerment. So creating this feeling that the audience has a final say in many cases, so that they in fact decide what they want to hear, what they want to see. So in order for this element to function in the esports from the business side of things, the audience has to have this kind of feeling, even though it may not be entirely accurate, and there of course may be different elements, as I said, behind the scenes who kind of shape what is actually broadcasted. So here I'd like to make a small juxtaposition to show how a large-scale show, in this case Intel Extreme Masters post-match analysis conducted during this year's finals in Katowice, borrows from the already established media conventions. So because this element that kind of strives to directly shape how esports match is consumed, how it is perceived. So here we have Kevin van der Kooi, also known as Rotterdam, who is analyzing a StarCraft match. So you can see these various circles, yeah, this hand-drawn lines which show the positions of various units, this kind of analysis. And here is one of the most famous Polish football coaches and commentators, Jacek Gmoch, using a very similar techniques to help the audience to visualize the tactical intricacies of the match, of the football match, of course. It is, well, again, of course, not to say that Gmoch invented this method, but he kind of popularized it quite early during the traditional television broadcasts. So he somehow paved the way and even became this kind of symbolic, often like even meme-like figure. So this kind of shows this overlap of different tactics when it comes to consumption employed by different business entities, so to speak. And also, it is important to note that large-scale events also incorporate more and more personal stories. So during the broadcasts, one can see like a visible effort from the organizers to establish some sort of this heartwarming narrative to make players a little bit closer, a little bit more familiar to the viewers. So again, this is from this year's Intel Extreme Masters, and here's Elazer, probably one of the most successful Polish StarCraft player, while talking about his personal goals besides competitive gaming. That being said, it's not all, well, roses and fairy tale unicorns on the consumption side of Eastern European esports. Some groups, including women-only teams, face logistic problems along the financial ones. So there's this kind of lack of continuity in many esports-related business incentives. And it's very detrimental to the development of the competitive gaming scene as a whole. Such was the case of Olimpia Cichosz, you can see her here. One of the most successful Polish League of Legends players, well, regardless of gender, really, who was forced to rapidly change teams over the very short period of time due to the issues connected with poor management of her team, which, of course, like, in the long term hindered her career. There is also this notion of media incentives promoting well, persons who are not maybe as strictly historically connected to esports as these, well, media faces of esports. So people who nowadays get involved in esports, well, they especially in local esports scene, of course, they come from very diversified media backgrounds. For example, Kinga Kujaska, you can see her here, used to work for MMA shows as a hostess. Then she moved to work for local Sony department, and she was involved in hosting promotional PlayStation events. And finally, she got involved in professional level of Counter-Strike esports commentary and analysis during large-scale events. So this shows that the professionals who are seeked out by the big esports involved companies, that they come not only from this group of long-time enthusiasts and with strong focus on esports, this group of diehard fans, but also they come from the groups of people who will kind of may contribute to make esports just more popular among the general public. And not only among the diehard fans of competitive gaming. So this is kind of elements which tries to reach for different audiences, so to speak. of course, we have, as I said, this multi-platformization. So we have esports related business incentives which try to deliver their message on Twitch TV, on Facebook, on different social media platforms. Also, there's this increased professionalization, and this kind of formats are also built on the existing media formats, which, for example, previously promoted football among Polish audiences. So here you can see, well, a caption from the Misja Esport, one of the, well, this TV show-like formats, which is directly broadcasted by Twitch TV, but is can also be seen on social media, and it's, well, basically borrows the formula of a previously popular show, which was called Misja Football. So this is kind of like capitalizing on the existing format to kind of push on with the esports related business initiatives. Okay, and the last but not least element, regulation. So these are basically the regulations and laws which abide the given product. So something that each, well, business entity has to take into account. So Poland has relatively few laws, which may result in the need to basically curate the broadcasted content in the case of live events. However, there is increased pressure from the global sponsors and organizers with regards, for example, to chat moderation. So this aspect of live broadcast used to be somehow neglected, as it is not directly connected with, well, production values of the show, so to speak. So as T.L. Taylor observes in her most recent book on streaming and esports, what happens outside the direct media frame of a broadcast is often considered irrelevant from the point of view of the producers. But in the current media landscape, well, comments and community activities involving sharing the broadcasted material and discussing it afterwards on the forums, social media, and message boards now become a crucial part of the esports related media circuit, and may in fact directly influence the reception and hence the popularity of a given broadcast or even a given esports title. Yeah, so this kind of need for curating the content during live events to kind of take, well, responsibility from the for the audience, for example, Twitch TV chats, becomes increasingly important when it comes to large-scale esports broadcasts. The example of such initiatives which strive for this kind of well, curatorial effort is the Aniki initiative, and it also enters the local markets. The local esports events also feature this kind of initiatives. And even though in Polish broadcasts and in Polish well, esports related media, here you can see a fragment of the aforementioned Misja Esport program. And there are some potentially controversial topics raised. Like here, the bear is holding a sign with a question stating that would mixed gender esports teams be allowed and promoted to compete, basically. So, but this kind of, well, questions are treated more like in this, like a PR elements of this call to action for the audience, and they are mostly hidden among the paid promotion. Yeah, you can probably see here the labels and some promotional materials lying on the table. So there are some efforts to foster a debate within community about some contentious topics, but mostly these topics must give way to other forms of more or less direct promotion. And yeah, here's this adverts kind of like encouraging people to get familiar with the any key initiative. These were, yeah, as you can see, I took them during the Intel Extreme Masters Katowice. I took these screenshots. So yeah, this is what basically any key initiative stands for. So this kind of strives to maintain the responsibility from the audience as to what they write in the chat, as to how they behave towards a center, as certain players, and all the other elements which yeah, strive for more like equal and more like a safe environments within esports. And this is also kind of important from the business side of things, as this kind of initiatives also make the especially large-scale events more welcome to the audiences from outside the core esports fandom. Um, in that way, someone who comes from the outside and is just maybe curious about this big media show involved in events such as Intel Extreme Masters can more or less safely read the chat and just enjoy the show. So yeah, there's also this element to it. Okay, moving to the conclusion. So in terms of local, the Polish esports scene, we have this constant evolution of formula. We have different ways of trying to make the production value of a large-scale esport events more appealing to increasingly wide audiences. We also have numerous new business initiatives, but as I've hopefully shown you, they are built mostly on the existing media formats, and they use some elements which were previously involved, for example, in the promotion of football-related events. There's of course this whole platformization of esports, this multiverse integration. So we have this increasing, for example, some ways of contacting directly Twitch streamers of, for example, ways of making the esports broadcast more interactive. Yeah, that would be the main goal of such elements. And yeah, here I provide a short note on the references, and yeah, thank you very much for your attention.